We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
New York honored the almost 3,000 people killed on September 11, 2001 in a solemn ceremony at Ground Zero.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration announced Wednesday it would soon ban flavored e-cigarette products to stem a rising tide of youth users following a spike in vaping-linked deaths.
The U.S. Supreme Court allows President Trump's administration to implement asylum restrictions that prevent most Central American migrants from applying at the U.S. border.
And some 2,500 people are still unaccounted for in the Bahamas after Hurricane Durian's devastating pass.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
Now to the news. New York honored the almost 3,000 people killed on September 11, 2001 in a solemn ceremony at Ground Zero, where hijacked Al-Qaeda planes brought down the Twin Towers. Take a look.
Et après, le deuxième s'est écroulé. Alors là, les gens hurlaient dans la rue. Ils disaient, je peux pas croire, ils pleuraient, il y a des gens qui vomissaient. Tout le monde essayait de téléphoner, mais les lignes téléphoniques marchaient très mal. Ça doit être comme ça pendant la guerre, je pense.
À 9h, tous les employés étaient présents.
Ils sont déjà au bureau.
American Airlines Boeing 767 loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact left a gaping, burning hole near the 80th floor of the 110-story skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapping hundreds more in higher floors. As the evacuation of the tower and its twin got underway, television cameras broadcasted live images of what initially appeared to be a freak accident, and then 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767 UA Flight 175 appeared out of the sky and then turned sharply toward the World Trade Center and sliced into the South Tower near the 60th floor. The collision caused a massive explosion that showered burning debris over surrounding buildings and onto the streets below. It immediately became clear that America was under attack. The hijackers were Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations. Reportedly financed by the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization of Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden, they were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War, and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Relatives of victims, police officers, firefighters, and city leaders gathered at the National September 11 Memorial to mark the 18th anniversary of the deadliest single attack on U.S. soil. They held poignant moments of silence at 8:46 a.m. and then at 9:03 a.m., the precise times that the passenger jet struck the North and South Towers. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Mayor Bill de Blasio, and his predecessors, Michael Bloomberg, Rudy Giuliani, were among those who attended. In what has become an annual tradition, relatives began reading out the long list of those who were killed, saying a few words about those who died in a ceremony that takes almost 4 hours. Bagpipes played as police officers walked into the ceremony carrying the U.S. flag before the U.S. national anthem was played. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump welcomed the victims' families and survivors to the White House, where they marked the anniversary with a moment of silence.
It has been 18 years since terror attacks changed New York forever. At least 3,000 people were killed when hijacked planes crashed into the Twin Towers. We have more from Eagle News correspondent in New York, Juan Blanco Soriano.
On this 18th anniversary of the September 11th tragedy at the World Trade Center, the world stops to reflect and remember the thousands of innocent lives lost. people would now have a place to gather to remember and honor those who perished. The National September 11 Memorial opened on the 10th anniversary of the attacks in a dedication ceremony for victims' families. The memorial consists of 2 reflecting pools set in the footprints of the Twin Towers. The design, entitled Reflecting Absence, was selected from a design competition of more than 5,000 entries. Each pool is 1 acre in size. 30-foot waterfalls cascade down all sides. There are 2,983 names on the September 11 Memorial to honor the 2,977 people killed in 2001 in New York, at the Pentagon, and on Flight 93 in Pennsylvania, and for the 6 people killed in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. As a tribute, roses are placed upon the victims' names on their birthdays. More than 48 million people have visited the memorial since it opened, from all 50 states and more than 190 countries around the world. New Yorkers and all Americans will always remember the courage and resilience of the people who gave their lives on September 11th. Reporting from Lower Manhattan, this is Joanne Soriano for Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Meanwhile, President Trump pledged to hit the Taliban harder than ever as America marked the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks that led the country into war in Afghanistan. Trump's remarks came after he aborted what would have been a historic Afghanistan peace summit, and as relatives remembered the victims of the deadliest terror attacks on U.S. soil at ceremonies in New York and Washington. Take a look. Now, President Trump spoke at a Pentagon event honoring the nearly 3,000 people killed in the attacks, announcing an unprecedented escalation of the military assault on the Taliban. Take a look.
We had peace talks scheduled a few days ago. I called them off when I learned that they had killed a great American soldier from Puerto Rico and 11 other innocent people. They thought they would use this attack to show strength, but actually what they showed is unrelenting weakness. The last 4 days, we have hit our enemy harder than they have ever been hit before, and that will continue. And if for any reason they come back to our country, we will go wherever they are and use power the likes of which the United States has never used before. And I'm not even talking about nuclear power. Today, our nation honors and mourns the nearly 3,000 lives that were stolen from us on September 11th, 2001. On these grounds, 184 people were murdered when al-Qaeda terrorists overtook American Airlines Flight 77 and crashed it into the Pentagon.
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump walked outside the White House to observe a moment of silence at 8:46 a.m., the time when hijackers flew the first of 2 commercial jetliners into the World Trade Center in New York. Later, President Trump addressed the ceremony at the Pentagon for families of those killed when al-Qaeda terrorists flew a hijacked plane into the building that is the headquarters of the U.S. military. Early Wednesday, ahead of the ceremony, an American flag was unfurled down the side of the Pentagon.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday allowed President Donald Trump's administration to implement asylum restrictions that prevent most Central American migrants from applying at the U.S. border. Democrats said the ruling puts people's lives at risk. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, dissenting from the decision, wrote that once again the executive branch has issued a rule that seeks to upend long-standing practices regarding refugees who seek shelter from persecution. She wrote again, and I quote, "In effect, the rule forbids almost all Central Americans to apply for asylum in the United States if they enter or seek to enter through the southern border unless they were first denied asylum in Mexico or another third country." The decision, temporarily in effect while lower court proceedings play out, is a victory for Trump's restrictive immigration policies, which he has made a central pillar of his presidency, but which have been repeatedly challenged in court. The asylum restrictions target the flow of migrants from Central America and other countries who have tried to cross into the United States from Mexico and request asylum. These requests, often made by families saying they have fled endemic violence and poverty in their countries, allow the applicants to remain in the United States and to move around freely while their cases are adjudicated, which can take 2 years.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump's administration announced it would soon ban flavored e-cigarette products to stem a rising tide of youth users following a spike in vaping-linked deaths.
We have a problem in our country. It's a new problem. It's a problem that nobody really thought about too much a few years ago, and it's called vaping. Especially vaping as it pertains to innocent children. And they're coming home and they're saying, "Mom, I want to vape." And the parents don't know too much about it, and nobody knows too much about it, but they do know it's causing a lot of problems. And we're going to have to do something about it. One of the words and one of the reasons we're meeting today is to let you know that it's out there. And we want to have parents understand that we're studying it very carefully. It's, again, very new and potentially very bad. There have been deaths and there have been a lot of other problems. People think it's an easy solution to cigarettes, but it's turned out that it has its own difficulties.
In addition to 6 deaths, more than 450 people who reported vaping either nicotine, cannabis products, or both have fallen ill in recent months, with symptoms including breathing difficulty and chest pain, before some were hospitalized and placed on ventilators. Several teens across the U.S. have been placed in medically induced comas, including one whose doctor said he may require a lung transplant if he recovers. Which is why Alex Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services, said they must be banned.
On as yet undisclosed new data that we have from the National Youth Tobacco Survey. This information shows a continued surging in adolescent usage of e-cigarettes. It also shows that the youth are drawn to flavored e-cigarettes, including mint and menthol. Currently, about 8 million adults use e-cigarettes, but 5 million children are using e-cigarettes. This is exceptionally harmful to our children. An entire generation of children risk becoming addicted to nicotine because of the attractiveness, appealability, and availability of these vaping products. So with the President's support, the Food and Drug Administration intends to finalize a guidance document that would commence enforcement to require that all flavors other than tobacco flavor would be removed from the market. This would include mint and menthol flavoring, as well as candy flavors, bubblegum flavor, fruit flavor, alcohol flavor. You get the drift. So once the FDA would finalize this guidance, we would begin enforcement actions to remove all such products from the marketplace.
Now, President Trump also graciously acknowledged his wife, Melania, for her efforts to call attention to this pressing issue.
Vaping has become a very big business, as I understand it, like a giant business in a very short period of time. But we can't allow people to get sick, and we can't have our youth be so affected. And I'm hearing it, and that's how the First Lady got involved. And she's got a son together that is a beautiful young man, and she feels very, very strongly about it. She's seen it. We're both reading it. A lot of people are reading it. But people are dying.
Meanwhile, New York's health department is focusing its probe on counterfeit cannabis cartridges containing vitamin E oil, which is harmful when inhaled. Federal authorities, however, have yet to identify a single substance common to all cases. Some medics have reported seeing patients developed acute lipoid pneumonia, a non-infectious form of respiratory ailment that occurs when oils or fat-containing substances enter the lungs, a potential clue for what is driving the illness. Now, that said, it's unclear why these cases have only been reported in the United States and whether they are even new or only being recognized after earlier misdiagnosis.
Hundreds of people gather at a mall in downtown Hong Kong, waving Chinese flags and chanting, "China, add oil," to show support to the government. Before 1 p.m., hundreds of pro-Beijing protesters gathered on the atrium of IFC Mall in Central. They were responding to an online call to stage a patriotic flash mob. Many brought national flags and sang the Chinese anthem and other patriotic songs. According to witnesses at the scene, a pro-Chinese crowd also chanted support the police and sang other patriotic Chinese songs. The pro-China flash mob was immediately countered by a smaller group of supporters of the anti-extradition movement who sang glory to Hong Kong. There was a brief shouting match between the two sides, which ended after most of the pro-China supporters left the mall at 1:30 p.m.
Meanwhile, prominent Hong Kong pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong denied that he is a separatist, saying he simply wants free elections for the former British colony, a promise enshrined in a 1997 handover agreement between Britain and China. On a visit to Berlin, as he sought to drum up international support for the movement, Wong called on the free world to take concrete action to stand with Hong Kong protesters.
That's another reason, under a greater context, the protests in Hong Kong are not likely to stop, because we are still fighting for our fundamental rights and democracy. Free election is the basic civil rights and freedom written in our Constitution and the Sino-British Joint Declaration. But those promises are not fulfilled by Beijing. They just conduct hardline suppression from within. But if we stop our pursuit and determination of democracy now and let Carrie Lam succeed, international attention on Hong Kong protests might fade out and political suppression will take place and continue in the future. But the truth is, China is known for not playing by the rules and with the worst and ridiculous track record for its human rights violation. The failure of one country, two system, or the erosion of one country, two system to one country and one and a half system in Hong Kong is just present how China do not rely on the international treaty since 1984.
He also said Germany should stop delivering equipment to riot police in Hong Kong, and he said the United States should pass a bill expressing support for the pro-democracy movement. Wong will travel to the United States on Friday, where he will seek bipartisan support for his cause. Millions of people have demonstrated in recent months in the biggest challenge to China's rule of the financial hub since its handover from Britain.
Japan's newly appointed environment minister has said he wants to scrap nuclear power plants, warning of the need to avoid a repeat of the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. The comments from Shinjiro Koizumi, a rising political star and son of former Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi, are his first on the controversial issue since he was named in a cabinet reshuffle Wednesday. The comments are not expected to have any immediate impact on the government's already stated position of moving slowly away from dependence on nuclear energy, a task complicated by Japan's considerable reliance on coal. A darling of the Japanese media, Shinjiro Koizumi is the third youngest minister appointed to the cabinet in Japan since the end of World War II. Despite intense media spotlight, he has been coy on expressing his views on controversial issues, including the question of nuclear power. His father is known for having shifted his own stance on nuclear power dramatically since resigning from politics to a position of strong opposition. The government of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said it wants to move away from nuclear energy, but it anticipates relying on the sector heavily for years to come, particularly as it works to meet its obligations under the Paris Climate Accord to reduce carbon emissions.
In other news, former Indonesian President B.J. Habibie, who ushered in an era of democratic reforms after the downfall of longtime dictator Suharto, died on Wednesday at the age of 83 in Jakarta, according to his family and officials. Habibie died at a military hospital in the capital after suffering from heart failure. In a televised speech announcing Habibie's death, President Joko Widodo called the former aircraft engineer and politician a world-class scientist and the father of Indonesian technology. Habibie was born in June 1936 in a small town in South Sulawesi and studied aviation and aerospace engineering in Germany and the Netherlands before returning home in the mid-1970s. Suharto asked him to help industrialize the country. He chaired the state-owned aviation company Industri Pesawat Terbang Nusantara and then served as Minister of Research and Technology for 20 years. Habibie was sworn in as Indonesia's third president in 1998, just 2 months after becoming vice president to Suharto, who ruled for 3 decades until mass protest forced his resignation. Habibie helped usher in a transition to democracy for the world's most populous Muslim nation and stabilized the economy, which was reeling from the Asian financial crisis and decades of corruption. Habibie served for just 17 months as president, and he withdrew from contention in the October 1999 election and was succeeded by Abdurrahman Wahid. He is survived by 2 sons.
Sedang memimpin. Dia tidak memimpin yang memilihnya, dia memimpin.
Almost 200 Nigerian migrants were repatriated from South Africa on Wednesday following a wave of xenophobic violence that swept through the country and sparked sharp exchanges between the two countries. A flight carrying 189 Nigerians landed in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, with some of those on board punching the air and singing their national anthem while waving pictures of burnt shops. Johannesburg and surrounding areas were rocked by a series of deadly attacks on foreigners last week, including many directed against Nigerian-owned businesses and properties. At least 10 people were killed in the violence and hundreds of shops destroyed, while more than 420 people were arrested. No Nigerians were killed, but the violence led to condemnation across Africa, particularly in Nigeria, fueling diplomatic tensions between the continent's 2 leading nations. The violence also prompted reprisal attacks against South African firms in Nigeria and the temporary closing of South Africa's diplomatic missions in Lagos and Abuja.
We also hope that the others will come back because we had 15 hours delay deliberately by the South African authorities. That's why they came this late. We hope it doesn't happen again.
To pay for the flight to come even, I knew I couldn't make it because my workshop is damaged. Everything there is burnt and I just had to run away for my life. I'm just going to try to open my workshop, open another mechanical workshop, then I start my business all over again. I know I'm not in South Africa, I know I'm in Nigeria, and I hope things are going to come out all right for me.
Nigeria are selling drugs. but the corruption started from their police and the immigration. They know people who are dealing with drugs. Can't they fish them out? They know what to do. You understand? Even all over the world, they are doing drugs. But the corruption started from the police and the immigration. Can the drugs come to South Africa without the police consent or the immigration? No.
Going now to the Brexit update, UK Labour MPs want to return to Parliament after the government published its no-deal Brexit assessment. Liberal Democrat Brexit spokesman Tom Brake reacted after Operation Yellowhammer documents confirmed there are severe risks if the UK leaves the EU without a deal.
What the documents do now confirm officially, now that we've seen the report officially, is that the medicines, food and fuel shortages that people have been talking about, that is exactly the sort of thing that the government expects to happen in a no-deal scenario. And therefore, when government ministers go round the TV studios claiming everything's going to be fine, there's nothing to worry about, that is clearly not true. Well, this document is only 5 pages long. I can't believe that the sum total of the work that the government have done preparing for no deal is 5 pages, because if it is, I'll be even more worried than I already am in terms of the level of preparation. Interestingly, the report, the title of the report was changed from a base case scenario to a worst case. In other words, originally the document was about what was likely to happen. Now the government are claiming it's a worst case scenario, so I'm rather suspicious of that. I suspect that they are sitting on an awful lot more documents in relation to no deal that we need to see, but of course we also need to see the documents about the reasons why the Prime Minister shut down Parliament, because I suspect that those documents, so that those emails that are being exchanged, those messages that are being exchanged, text messages, will confirm that the Prime Minister lied about the reasons why he wanted to shut down Parliament. We all know that the reason he wanted to shut down Parliament is because he didn't want Parliament holding him to account.
Mr. Speaker.
British Premier Boris Johnson faced calls to reverse his suspension of Parliament after a Scottish court ruled it illegal, as government documents warned that a no-deal Brexit could lead to civil unrest and shortages of food and medicines. The Operation Yellowhammer documents, which the government was forced to release on Wednesday, revealed that preparedness for a no-deal Brexit remained at a low level, with logjams at channel ports threatening to impact supplies. They also warned of a rise in public disorder and community tensions in such a scenario. The government stressed that it was updating the assumptions in the document and that it was neither an impact assessment nor a prediction of what is most likely to happen.
Several thousand protesters camped in downtown Buenos Aires to demand Argentina declare a food emergency as the economic crisis deepened just weeks ahead of the presidential election.
Estamos por salir en una nueva movilización con Acampe, que es una permanencia en el lugar por 48 horas ante la ausencia total de respuesta a reclamos elementales en una Argentina que está devastada por la desocupación, el hambre y la pobreza.
Clashes broke out with police as demonstrators tried to block public transport networks. On Thursday, Argentinian lawmakers will consider a food emergency bill presented by the opposition that would allow more funds to be allocated to manage the increasingly desperate situation. But President Mauricio Macri's center-right government is opposed to the proposal, saying that it has already taken other emergency measures, such as the elimination of basic food taxes. The country has been in a recession since last year and has one of the highest inflation rates in the world, running at more than 54%. Argentina's economic crisis has seen the peso lose half its value, unemployment soar, and the economy shrink by 5.8% in the first quarter. Argentines have seen their earnings, savings, and purchasing power diminished. It is among the Latin American countries where hunger increased most during 2018, according to the UN's food program.
Meanwhile, some 600,000 people hit the streets of Barcelona in support of Catalan independence. According to police, with the figure significantly lower than 2018, during a mass rally billed as a test of strength for the region's divided separatist movement. The figure is the lowest turnout for the mass separatist rally held each year on Catalonia's National Day, known as the Diada, which marks the fall of Barcelona to Spain in 1714, since the first one was staged in 2012. Last year, around 1 million people turned out for the demonstration. This year's rally comes just weeks ahead of a crucial ruling by the Supreme Court in the trial of 12 separatist leaders who led the failed 2017 bid for independence, triggering Spain's worst political crisis in decades. But 2 years on from the failed independence push, the separatist movement remains sharply divided, and Wednesday's turnout was likely to disappoint organizers who had chartered hundreds of buses to bring in supporters. On October 1, 2017, the regional government of Catalonia, which accounts for about 1/5 of Spain's economic output and is home to 7.5 million people, pushed ahead with a banned independence referendum. But the vote was marred by police violence, and although the separatists made a declaration of independence, it was short-lived. Today, many senior separatist leaders not behind bars have fled the country, including former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont, who is now based in Belgium.
The United States government on Thursday launched a 92.3 million peso project that seeks to strengthen the country's inclusive education for children with disability. Dubbed as the Gabay Project, the initiative will be led by the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, and Resources for the Blind Incorporated for 3 years in targeted areas in Maasin City and the provinces of Batangas, Sorsogon, and Southern Leyte. USAID Mission Director in the Philippines, Lawrence Hardy II, said the initiative would increase the capacity of service providers and community health workers to detect the needs of children with visual and hearing impairments. One of its goals is also to improve the abilities of teachers in delivering appropriate learning plans for persons with disabilities. The United States is a strong advocate of disability policies and programs. We believe that people with disabilities have and should have all the same rights as others, including education, health, training, and employment, Hardy said. Dr. Yolanda Quijano, Project Gabay's chief of party, said the project will be well coordinated with the Department of Education and local government units and is seen to benefit around 1,800 Filipino children with disability by the end of its implementation in June 2022.
The news continues. Zero Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Young Once Upon a Time Season 3, tuwing linggo, alas 8 ng gabi.
Net25 is now available on OSN, the largest entertainment network in the Middle East and North Africa.
Hello po sa inyong lahat diyan. Ako po si Leo Obligar at araw-araw tayong magkakasama sa Piskante ng Bayan.
Watch your favorite Net25 shows on OSN Channel 725, same day as the Philippines. Net25 shows live and on demand anytime, anywhere, on any mobile device on OSN Play.
Dito po sa Net25, USN, siguradong at home ka dito.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced that he agreed to delay an increase in tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods by 2 weeks. He said the decision was requested by Beijing. Now, President Trump announced that he agreed to delay the increase in tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods by 2 weeks. Now, he said, "We have agreed as a gesture of goodwill to move the increased tariffs on $250 billion worth of goods 25 to 30% from October 1st to October the 15th. Trump tweeted, and he said the delay was requested by Vice Premier of China, Liu He, and due to the fact that the People's Republic of China will be celebrating their 70th anniversary. The announcement came after China said earlier in the day that it would spare some U.S. products from punitive new tariffs, an apparent conciliatory move ahead of high-level talks next month, aiming to resolve the two nations' protracted trade war. However, the goods do not include big-ticket agricultural items that could be crucial to the ultimate success of any agreement between the two sides, whose standoff is dragging on the global economy. The Chinese exemptions will become effective on September 17 and will be valid for a year, according to the Customs Tariff Commission on the State Council, which released two lists that include seafood products and anti-cancer drugs.
I think they did the right thing. I think it was good for them, but they took them off. Yeah, I think it was a gesture, okay? But it was a big move. People were shocked. I wasn't shocked. But I deal with them, and I know them, and I like them, and I hope we can do something.
Trade negotiators have said they will meet in Washington in early October, raising hopes for an easing of tensions between the world's two biggest economies.
Signs of easing tensions between China and the U.S. in their trade war fueled hopes of a breakthrough in high-level talks next month, but Asian markets were mixed as dealers struggled to extend this week's healthy rally. Tokyo ended 0.8% higher and Shanghai added 0.8%, while Sydney climbed 0.3%. Mumbai and Taipei also rose, but Hong Kong dipped 0.3%, while there were also losses in Singapore, Wellington, Jakarta, and Manila. In early trade, London, Paris, and Frankfurt each rose 0.2%. The apparent easing of trade tensions boosted oil prices as the prospect of an end to the row revived hopes for demand. However, the gains followed a sharp drop for both main contracts as traders bet on a possible return of Iranian crude to the market after the firing of Trump's hawkish National Security Advisor John Bolton eased fears of a conflagration in the Middle East.
Cathay Pacific announced its August passenger numbers were down 11.3% on last year after the troubled airline faced a backlash from Beijing over Hong Kong's heated pro-democracy protests. The airline, which is based in the financial hub, has had a torrid few weeks after Chinese state media and authorities blasted the company because some of its 27,000 employees had taken part in or were sympathetic to anti-government protesters. August was an incredibly challenging month, both for Cathay Pacific and for Hong Kong, according to Cathay's Chief Customer and Commercial Officer, Ronald Lam, in a statement. Lam added that tourist arrivals significantly affected Cathay's performance as they were nearly half of what they usually are during the summer holidays. The flagship carrier had a total of 2.9 million passengers last month, the biggest drop in more than a decade, according to Bloomberg, with inbound Hong Kong traffic down 38% and outbound down 12% year-on-year. The statement also said that inbound demand to Hong Kong from mainland China and Northeast Asia was severely hit. Hong Kong is now in the 15th week of political unrest, which was sparked by a now-shelved bill that would have allowed extraditions to the mainland.
Taiwan's richest man sensationally quit the opposition party on Thursday, rebuking his former political allies and strongly hinting that he would run as an independent in an upcoming presidential election. Terry Gu, who made his billions at the helm of the world's largest electronics assembler, Foxconn, made his announcement in a handwritten letter which has shaken a political establishment long dominated by two parties. Gu, 68, said the Kuomintang party he joined 49 years ago had become corrupt and a platform for personal gain and power. The island will vote for a new president and parliament in January elections set to be dominated by relations with China. Gu's self-made tale is legendary in Taiwan and mimics the island's phenomenal economic success. But the huge factories built in China under Gu have rattled critics over his perceived coziness with Beijing's leadership.
Meanwhile, several hundred hospital workers protested in Paris after a rallying cry by the CGT union about deteriorating conditions in the healthcare sector. It comes amid an ongoing strike among emergency room staff, which has already rumbled on for the past 6 months. Take a look. On Monday, Health Minister Agnes Buzyn pledged 754 million euros to be released between 2019 and 2022 to finance 12 measures, among them a 24-hour consultation service to be set up by 2020 to guide patients to the most appropriate services. In June, meanwhile, the French government unveiled a 70 million euro aid package for ER staff. Now, that funding was intended to provide risk bonuses and help hospitals recruit extra paramedical staff during the holiday season. Unimpressed, ER workers decided to continue their social action. They demanded higher wages and more beds in hospitals. Doctors and nurses say the plan fails to resolve the central issue of a lack of resources. The striking personnel say they faced low pay and a relentless pace in emergency rooms that are saturated.
The backlash against big tech heads into a new phase with top legal officials from dozens of U.S. states announcing an antitrust investigation of Google, which they say may reveal its potential monopolistic behavior.
Today, 50 attorney generals from different states and territories are launching investigation into Google's potential monopolistic behavior.
The internet was said to be revolutionary because it enhanced and expanded human contact. It placed ideas and conversations to take place. It enhanced the exchange of ideas and the freedom to efficiently publish that content. If you don't act now, that dream will die. And that's what this investigation is about.
Most Americans think it's free to Google something, but it comes at a cost. The cost of freedom to choose the best products for the best companies.
For now, the probe will focus on Google's dominance in digital advertising. But the Attorneys General also hinted the investigation could become broader, extending to other businesses of Google's parent company, Alphabet. They mentioned smartphones and online video. Google owns YouTube.
Meanwhile, France warned it will block development of Facebook's planned Libre cryptocurrency in Europe because it threatens the monetary sovereignty of governments. I want to be absolutely clear, in these conditions, we cannot authorize the development of Libre on European soil, according to Bruno Le Maire, and he said this at the opening of an OECD conference on virtual cryptocurrencies. Facebook unveiled in June its plans for Libre in an announcement greeted with concern by governments and critics of the social network behemoth, whose reputation has been tarnished by its role in spreading fake information and extremist videos. Expected to launch in the first half of 2020, Libre is designed to be backed by a basket of currency assets to avoid the wild swings seen with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Another major difference is that control over it would not be decentralized but entrusted to a Swiss-based non-profit association. Besides Facebook, backers of Libre include payment giants Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal, as well as ride-hailing apps Lyft and Uber. Facebook has promoted Libre as an opportunity to provide online commerce and financial services at minimal cost to more than 1 billion unbanked people, adults without bank accounts, or those who use services outside the banking system, such as payday loans to make ends meet. Libre and the new Calibre digital wallet that would go with it promises eventually to give Facebook opportunities to build financial services into its offerings, offer to expand its own commerce, and let more small businesses buy ads on the social network. But officials have raised concerns about how the currency would be regulated, particularly how it would comply with regulations about combating money laundering and financing of terrorism.
Volkswagen unveils the ID3 compact sedan, the first of a series of new electric models, a $30 billion bet to try to make a name for itself in electromobility and turn the page on Dieselgate. Watch this.
ID3 wird mehr als ein neues Modell sein. Das ist das Auto, das von uns jetzt erwartet wird. Das Auto, das wir auch selbst von uns erwarten. Ein Volkswagen, der das Elektroauto von der Nische in die Mitte der Gesellschaft bringt und für jeden erreichbar macht.
Meanwhile, gamers got a sneak peek at everything from the hyper-realistic, much-anticipated Death Stranding to an Olympic-themed Mario edition at this year's Tokyo Game Show. Take a look. The annual event for game enthusiasts is showcasing the diversity of the field, though Kojima Productions' long-awaited Death Stranding for the PlayStation is expected to be among the biggest draws. It's a totally new type of game, according to creator Hideo Kojima, a towering figure in the industry who struck out on his own after years honing his talent at Konami with landmark titles like Metal Gear. Yazuyuki Yamaji, Secretary General of the Computer Entertainment Suppliers Association that organizes the show, said that Kojima is always on the cutting edge. Kojima himself presented the game to hundreds of journalists and industry insiders on Thursday afternoon, hours after releasing a 7-minute trailer. The game, which is scheduled to be released November 8 on PlayStation 4, is based around the idea of reconnecting and bridging divides, overcoming the strand referred to in its title. Back in more familiar territory was the mustachioed face of Super Mario, who makes an appearance in a joint Olympic-themed venture with Sonic the Hedgehog in a release time ahead of next year's Summer Games hosted in Tokyo. And while esports won't be on the schedule at the 2020 Olympic Games, they're well represented at the trade show this year, even though Japan is regarded as a relative latecomer to the field compared to other parts of Asia and the West.
About 2,500 people are unaccounted for in the Bahamas after Hurricane Durian, the archipelago's National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA, said. NEMA spokesman Carl Smith told reporters that some of the missing people may eventually be located. Approximately 76,000 people were affected by Durian, the UN's International Organization for Migration has said, citing official reports. Of these, thousands have been evacuated and about 860 are in emergency shelters in the capital city of Nassau. At least 50 people died in the hurricane, which slammed into the northern Bahamas as a Category 5 storm, and officials have said they expect the number to rise significantly. A NEMA spokesman said more than 5,500 people have been evacuated so far from the northern Bahamas islands of Grand Bahama and Abaco, which were devastated by the storm.
Meanwhile, the number of blazes in Indonesia's rainforest has jumped sharply, according to satellite data, spreading smog across Southeast Asia and adding to concerns about the impact of increasing wildfire outbreaks worldwide on global warming. Now, illegal blazes to clear land for agricultural plantations have been raging on Sumatra and Borneo Islands, with Indonesia deploying water-bombing helicopters and thousands of security forces to tackle them. Indonesia's forest fires are an annual problem but have been worsened this year by particularly dry weather and in recent days sent toxic smog floating over Malaysia and triggered a diplomatic row. The number of hotspots, areas of intense heat detected by satellite, which indicate a high chance of fire, jumped sharply in Indonesia on Wednesday, according to the Singapore-based ASEAN Specialized Meteorological Center. There were 1,619 hotspots detected on the Indonesian part of Borneo and Sumatra, up from 861 a day earlier, according to a tally from the center, which monitors forest fires and smog outbreaks.
The Philippines basketball coach resigned and apologized to the Hoops Mad Nation Wednesday after the national squad failed to win a game at the FIBA Basketball World Cup and finished dead last. Yang Giao's team were blown out by a combined 105 points by Italy and Serbia to open their campaign in Group D at the tournament in China, and also lost to Angola in overtime 84-81. The Gilas, ranked 31st in the world, fared no better in the classification round, losing by large margins to Tunisia and Iran to finish last out of the 32 nations competing. I am sorry we could not deliver a better performance. Our players gave their best against talented, bigger, stronger, and better prepared athletes from the best teams in the world, Giao said in a statement. Now that he is done as Gila's man coach, Giao can now focus on NLEX's campaign in the upcoming PBA Governors Cup.
Meanwhile, France blew the Basketball World Cup wide open by handing the U.S. their first loss in the competition in 13 years in their quarterfinal clash, powered by a double-double from big man Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz. Take a look.
All the things people were talking about Team USA, it was Team USA with his qualities. I think we just took advantage perhaps of experience. They had a lack of experience it's the best French team I've seen because they play at both ends of the court. It's not just an offensive team that executes well. It's not just a couple of guys on their own. They play at the defensive end. They're physical, individually play well defensively as a group.
All right, and with that, we end tonight's program.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also, check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Alma Angeles, and
we're one with 25.